All right, art nerds. So it took a few days, but we finally finished inking this bonus chapter for Naomi. So our next steps are to erase the pencils when applicable. We do have a spread where the pencils are actually an integral part of the art, and then scan it. And I'm going to scan it using my large format printer. So the erasers that I recommend for this, you're going to want something that's going to not cause ghosting. Ghosting is when your erasers have picked up some of your ink and leave your ink kind of gray and weak looking. It's not quite as dark or as bold as you would like it. And there's a few ways we can really help prevent ghosting. One is to allow our inks to cure to our paper surface for about 24 hours. All of these pages have had at least 24 hours of dry time. And two is to use a really soft eraser. So if you think a pink pearl is going to cut it, sorry, buddy. What I recommend is Moo erasers. I have a big Moo eraser here. And then I have a Creative Mark Vanish eraser. And both of these are very soft, gentle erasers. You can also use those moldable gum erasers to erase. Those are also pretty gentle. So I'm going to do a little erasing demo first. Then I'm going to erase all my pages off camera and we'll flip through the finished inks. So I'm using this large Moo eraser and I'm just gently erasing across the paper surface. And I'm trying to work in a systematic way because I want to get as much of that graphite up as possible. If you were inking this or if you were coloring this with Copic markers, it would be even more imperative that you get as much graphite up as possible because graphite can ruin your Copic marker nibs. We used a very hard, well, we used HB, which is pretty hard, not very hard. So it's actually very easy to erase it without any ghosting. The blue you see is the non-photo blue that I used earlier when printing out these pages. And hopefully all of that will come up when we stretch these watercolor pages, but that's another tutorial. So I also have on hand a drafting brush, and these might seem silly. I don't know. This is a new one that I bought for my students, but I've had the same drafting brush for at least 10 years. I use it every day. So to me at this point, it absolutely does not seem silly. You might think, oh, I can use my hand for that, but your hand has oils on it. Using a drafting brush will cleanly remove the eraser shavings without getting your hand's oils onto the paper itself. So I'm going to, because I don't necessarily think there's a whole lot more I need to explain for erasing. It is a pretty easy topic. It does shake the camera, and I apologize for that. But you want to kind of work in areas, brush it away, and then examine it for any remaining graphite. And again, since we're watercoloring it, it is not the end of the world if we don't remove all of it, but it'll look a lot better if we do. Okay, I'm not sure if my camera's going to pick this up, but I wanted to give you guys an example of ghosting. So this area here, they both kind of lifted up as I was erasing. It's not horrifically egregious. I could re-ink it, or I could paint over it and see if it's still a problem, but you know, it's nice when your originals look as good as your scans are going to look, because this is something we could very easily fix in Photoshop by just playing with the hue saturation or by just playing with contrast. But you know, I try to avoid ghosting when possible because it does change the contrast of the page overall. It lightens it slightly in some areas, and that can really contribute to muddiness. Plus, if I want to address that, then I have to re-ink it, which is additional time. But since I've talked about ghosting several times, I wanted to show you guys an example of it. So here are the finished inked pages. Let's flip through them together. Wow, I particularly like this spread illustration, this pinup illustration. because I like Naomi's expression, I like the oboe, I like the honk onomatopoeia. I think it's really cute, and I think, at least I hope, it gives a lot of insight into her personality because she's trying to learn an instrument that's fairly difficult. You don't get a lot of praise for playing the oboe. The oboe isn't the star of the showboat. And some of these pages feel a little bit busy, so I'm really looking forward to seeing how they look in watercolor. Now, busy isn't necessarily a bad thing. I mean, this is a busy morning before school. And I think these pages probably have more going on them than normal Kara pages, perhaps because I went with inks. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to scan these. That way I'll have a digital copy of them and I can play around with doing other things. And I'm going to watercolor them, and I'm using kind of a hybrid style of watercolor for me. Something that is a little bit more simple. Oh, see, I saw a mistake and I went to erase it and then I lost it. Something that's a little bit more simple than normal Kara pages where a lot of the form is carried by the watercolor itself. Since we have the black outlines, I don't actually have to define the forms as much, nor do I have to do as much contrast. That expression. I like this one too, that's really cute. And then these are the double page spread, and I really look forward to seeing how these come out. I'm excited to see the juxtaposition between pencils, inks, and watercolors. And this is actually one of my favorite panels, and it was a complete redo. I thought this chapter would be a really good opportunity to show things from Naomi's point of view, since we almost always see things from Kara's point of view. I also really like her character design for this chapter, particularly when she changes into like her after school clothes and she's more relaxed and more playful. And I also like the juxtaposition between like her uniform clothes and then what she wears at home. It's a very different side of her personality. And her wearing her hair up, that's not something she would normally choose to do. She really likes her hair. It's something that's mandated by the dress code of her school. So I wanted to kind of show maybe just a little bit how some schools have unfair, hypocritical rules for some students that they don't enforce for other students, particularly when it comes to natural hair. I know that's a bit not what we were necessarily diving into, but it does affect Naomi's life. It affects how she feels about herself, and it affects how she's treated at this school and how she feels about herself at this school. So I thought it was important to kind of hint at. I mean, she's still cute even when she's in uniform. See, as you ink, you find, or as you erase, you find all these areas. Oh no, it is inked. I was just thinking I need to trust myself more. But you find all these areas where maybe you forgot to ink something, except in my instance, I've been finding areas that I think I forgot to ink it, and then it turns out I'd left it like that on purpose. So I'm overthinking my inking. So this was inked on Canson Montval watercolor paper, which is a cellulose watercolor paper. It takes both ink and watercolor decently well, which is one of the reasons I chose this paper. These pages were inked with a Sakura Pigma FB, so this is a pigment-based brush pen. And you guys can find links to where you can get the materials in the description below. So I'm going to scan these. And then I'm going to start watercoloring them. And I know I promised you guys more watercolor tutorials. This cover and this. So in some of our earlier videos, like the video where we're talking about and flipping through the roughs, I showed you guys a comparison of how the pages develop. So I'd like to continue on that trend. So let's see, this is the cover thumbnail. This is the cover rough. And then this is the finished cover. Fair amount of changes were made. then we have the oboe illustration. So here is the thumbnail for the oboe. And then here is the rough for the oboe. And I also have a blog post where I'm kind of comparing some of the changes that I've made when I did my digital correction. So that will explain for some of the changes that you guys don't necessarily see accounted for here. This one's not as different. And I think it's really important to show this sort of development and these sort of changes so that you as a comic artist, or you as someone who's interested in becoming a comic artist, you can kind of see how these pages develop over time. They're not born perfect. They don't come out perfect. There's a lot of revision and there's still flaws on these pages. These are going to look even more different after I watercolor them. So here is the thumbnail for that first real page of comic. Here is the rough. And then here is the finished page. And I actually really like how her expression came out there at the bottom. Naomi is really cute in this chapter. Here is the thumbnail. And it's a really busy thumbnail, isn't it? A lot going on. We ended up pulling things in quite a bit. Here is the rough. And then here is the inked page. So on this page, between the roughs and the finished inks, there's not a lot of not too many changes. Just tightened a few items up. Made them a little bit easier to recognize. For this page, I pulled this panel out a lot more to show the kitchen better. I pulled them out a bit just to better frame them. I think I changed a few. Yeah, I like completely redrew his hand. And then this is the thumbnail for that. Alright, next is the bike page, which means I had to draw a bike. Those of you who are working with 3D assets or you're working in Clip Studio Paint, it's actually much easier for you to do this. I mentioned in the roughs video that I actually own the sort of bike I would have wanted to draw, but it's up in the attic and there was no way I was going to get it down to pose with it. So here's the thumbnails, and this drastically changed from here to here. A lot of restaging. And then over here, not so much change, but I drew Naomi's expression softer. And I actually found a backpack on Romway that I wanted her to have. It seemed like something Naomi would have. So I specifically based her backpack off the backpack I saw on Romway. Alright, then we have the homecoming scene. Not too much has changed in this one. Oh, wait, that's not true, actually. So, this is the thumbnail. This is the rough. And I really didn't like how I drew her. I felt like that felt really awkward. So, between the rough and the inked page, I actually completely restaged it just to show Pancake in her arms, because we don't actually have to see her bending over to pick him up to understand that she picked him up. And then between the thumbnail and the rough, I completely changed how she was holding him. I wanted to make that movement a little bit less ambiguous. And then we have the clothing change scene. So this panel ended up getting completely flipped so that he's chasing the butterfly back into this image here. And I really like how the inks on Naomi turned out here. And I definitely ate a lot of zebra cakes after school as a kid. Any kind of Little Debbie cakes. Is Little Debbie like just a regional thing? Or is it like, I guess you guys have Hostess cakes, but I didn't really grow up with Hostess. I grew up with Little Debs. So here is the phone call page. Here is the roughs for that. Whole lot of grids, because I wanted to do this sort of above shot where she's just like flopped over onto the cold stairs. So in Louisiana in the summer, if you're outside, yes, she could be inside, I know, but Naomi likes being outside. She doesn't like being home by herself, and her dad's at work, so she spends a lot of time outside. I base a lot of Naomi's, a lot of her personality, it comes from my own. So people are like, oh, is Kara supposed to be you? And I don't know. Like, they are all parts of me, or they're people I know. So all of my characters are based off of like combinations of traits from myself or from the people around me. So anyway, outside Louisiana, early September, late August, hot, hot, hot. The cement, if it's in the shade, would be about 20 degrees cooler. So you want to like maximize your body contact with the cement. And plus, she just had a bad day, a really bad first day of school. And then her mom texted her, and she and her mom are not on great terms. So it's just like, things are just really adding up and getting to be overwhelming. And I really like the expressions here when Pancake licks her tears off her face. Something I really enjoy, why I like having animals and pets in my comics, is you can have them behave in a very pure way. Like, what I mean by that is that animals don't care what you think of them. They want you to like them if they're pets, but like they're going to do silly, goofy things to make you happy. They don't care if they have your respect. So having pets in a comic is a really good way for me to have this kind of just like force for sweetness, I guess. I'm making it sound more saccharine than what I really mean, but it's also like comic relief and a cute element, but also like Pancake is a creature that just really loves Naomi. He really cares about her. He wants her to be happy. So it is a character who can kind of serve as like an emotional heat sink, I guess. So this page got changed and restaged a fair bit. So this was going to be a behind the head shot, and I restaged it so that it's like he's asking permission. I don't know about you guys, but my cat and my cat before him, Remy, they treat paw up, like please or gimme or can I have. So I thought that would be like a really cute motion that I think a lot of people will understand what he's trying to ask. So that's another fun thing about having animals in your comic, is they're strictly body language, and that's really fun to play with and to draw. I really enjoy exploring character acting and body language and facial expressions, and animals are a really good way to play around with that. And I really like Kara's expression down here, and I really like Naomi's pose right there. Okay, so now we're coming up to the double page spread. And the double page spread, and I mentioned this a few other times, this one is going to be fun for me because it's a flashback scene. So here's our thumbnail. It was designed as a single unit. Here are our roughs. You guys saw me design those as a single unit. And then I've changed a lot of things. Actually, digitally, I drew in her head. So this is going to be a little bit difficult to show you everything. So we have our double page spread here. We're going to focus on the rough stage of the double page spread. Okay, so the head is a completely new addition. And then this panel, this is really more from like Kara's point of view, right? And like we're empathetic with Kara. And you know what? This is Naomi's chapter. Most of the comic gets to be from Kara's point of view. So I decided to completely restage it, and I drew Naomi so we can see her expression and we can see her body language and we can see how much she has to accommodate. Like if she wants to have an eye-to-eye conversation, she has to really accommodate herself to that. And I've shown that in some of the other chapters too, where she's just like flat out laying in the grass. But this is a pose I take pretty often. I'm not a very flexible person. But I did take ballet for several years, so this is a pose that I'm usually hunched over in, and it just made sense to use this pose for Naomi. So we see the back of Kara, and she's still really emotive, like her hands are up in the air, her hair is all flooped, her leg is kipped up, and Naomi paint my pages that are set in the past more saturated and with fewer shadows than current pages to give this kind of impression of nostalgia and nostalgia vision. People will often do like sepia tone for nostalgia, and I use that sometimes when it's Meldina, kind of glossing over things, but generally I like going with the simpler watercolor with the more saturated colors because we always remember our past is better than it actually was. So for Naomi, I was thinking I would do her past because she's retelling these events to Kara and she's kind of glossing over them. So I want to create a dichotomy between what Naomi says and what actually happened. And I was thinking about going with really dark, maybe desaturated colors, but we're gonna kind of have to wait and see what I actually end up doing because that's just watercolor. It always changes. And I also drew all the other characters in the background as kind of these weird mannequin characters, and it's because Naomi is completely new to the school system. She moved to Hahnville from New Orleans. She doesn't know anybody. And she's going from one type of school to another. So she went from a very close-knit, small religious middle school to a much larger high school. I mean, even though this is a small town, the high school is a public high school and it's much larger. And everyone else has kind of grown up together and she doesn't know anybody at all. So she's brand new and they're not really looking to make new friends. And this is 110% based on my experiences growing up in the West Bank of St. Charles Parish because they were very reticent about accepting people who'd moved in. And you would think the new kid would be the most exciting thing ever. No, they were very closed against new kids. So I thought I would use that for Naomi and create this sense of like, she's like a very sweet person. She's a really sincere person. She works really hard. Her life before this was good, and then something traumatic happened and she had to move, and like things are just not improving for her. And this isn't intended to be like a let's torture Naomi sort of thing. It's just intended to be kind of like how real. It's, again, a lot of what happens to Naomi is stuff that happened to me. And so I'm excited about the spread, but it was also kind of like the major hump in the story that I had to get past because, I don't know, it was something about drawing all those people, even if they were mannequins, which was much easier than drawing them as though they were like 3D forms. But once I got past that, chapter is basically done. There are just 2 pages. So these are the thumbnails. And then I ended up adding this page after because I felt like it could benefit from another beat of father-daughter bonding. So Naomi and her dad are really close. And I wanted to show that. And her dad is actually a more important character than I'm letting on. Ah! Spoilers. Anyway, so I did a little bit. I actually really like how graphic this is. But I realized it didn't, given how I placed them in this, it didn't make rational sense. So I had to flip them and it lost some of its interest. And then between this and the finished page, I actually pulled this out a lot and spaced everything out a bit more because they are really like on top of that TV. Which, you know, in some homes that happens, but not in their home. And then everything else is pretty much the same. Gotta love that wood paneling. And finally, we have the breather page, the end of the chapter page. I will usually do an end cap because I write for kids. And I want my comics to be, even though we cover important topics and sometimes stressful topics, I want there to be a moment at the end of the chapter where you can exhale, where you can breathe. For me as a reader, I like seeing how people just live their everyday lives, and I like seeing the characters having happy moments and relaxed moments and want to thank you guys so much for watching. I hope these tutorials have been helpful, useful, and informative for you guys. If you're looking for more comic tutorials, check out my Intro to Comic Craft series here on this channel. I also teach comic classes in Nashville and in Louisiana. So if you're interested in learning when I might be offering a class in your area, you can sign up for my class mailing list down in the description below. If you just like my art in general and you want to keep tabs on what I'm doing, you can also sign up for my exclusive mailing list. I share all sorts of behind the scenes stuff with those people, and they often are alerted to giveaways first. So if you want to learn all about that, you can find a link to that mailing list down in the description below as well. If you're looking for more comic content, you can head on over to nattosoup.blogspot.com and check out my Intro to Comic Craft series. If you're looking for more watercolor content, I have a watercolor basics series here on this channel, as well as several watercolor tutorials, and I have a watercolor basics series over on the blog. So I have lots of watercolor comic content for you guys to enjoy. Speaking of watercolor comics, you guys can read the first volume of 7-Inch Kara, as well as some beautiful guest comics over at 7inchkara.com or 7inchkara.tumblr.com. And if you'd like to own the first volume of the comic, you guys can get that at 7inchkara.com/comic. I am working on getting volume 2 prepped. It has taken me so long, but it would really mean the world to me if you guys kept an eye out for that and gave me your support, since that's what all of this has been working towards. And just a reminder, if you're not a subscriber and you like what I do and you want to see more of it, make sure you hit that subscribe button and click the bell notification so YouTube lets you know when we have an update. Thank you guys so much for watching. I can't wait to see you.